All right, well, let's get started then. So again, welcome everyone to the RCR Wireless News, Securing the Cloud in the Age of Analytics and Software webinar. I am Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief here at RCR Wireless News. Go to the next slide here. All right. And today we'll be discussing cloud security in terms of the growing use of software, analytics, and virtualized platforms by telecom operators. This is obviously a very large topic at the moment with growing news reports surrounding online security breaches, but along with our panel members, we will look at where the industry is today in terms of the move towards ensuring the telecom market is prepared to handle the growing threat. Joining me today to provide insight into these topics are a wide range of experts, including longtime industry analyst Jerry Purdy from AT&T, who will provide an analyst overview on some of these topics. Andy Daudelin from AT&T to provide a carrier perspective on cloud security, including some of AT&T's work in the space. And Walter Kendrick from Sonus to provide a vendor perspective and discuss some of its recent work on the topic of security. The plan is to leave the final 15 to 20 minutes or so of the webinar for a Q&A from those of you listening in on the webinar. Please feel free during the webinar to use the questions tab in the control panel to send in those questions. If you have a question for a specific member of the panel, please make sure to include their name in the question as well, and we'll try to get those directed to the right person. For those that might be having audio difficulties, we'll try to speak as loudly as possible, but please make sure to also check your audio settings on your computer. Here's a quick slide giving some background on RCR Wireless News. We have been covering the mobile space for more than 30 years and have a lengthy history in covering the wireless ecosystem dating back to the early 1980s. All right. Also, more details on this topic can be found in a new report we have just finished up looking at the cloud security space. That'll be available here shortly on our website at rcrwireless.com. All right, so first I wanted to start by giving us a quick overview on the cloud security space, tapping into some of the findings from that report. Since we have such a prominent panel, I'll quickly zoom through some slides, but for the most part, those who want to take a longer look at the slides, we will have a replay of this webinar on our site shortly after its conclusion that should allow for a longer looks at the slides. Okay, so so with the report here, one thing we took a look at is kind of where the market was today in terms of the use of cloud. Obviously, telecom operators, as they are moving towards more dynamic and agile services, are looking for ways to support those types of services. And cloud platforms are part of that move, along with virtualization technologies, to have an impact on how operators are running their businesses. As you can see, operators have been very active in providing cloud-based options for customers, as well as have begun to use cloud platforms to enhance their own operations as well. So operators are taking a look at both from a consumer-facing and also an internal-facing view in terms of using cloud to increase their efficiency and their agility in the market. According to a study conducted by CompTIA in late 2014, more than 90% of companies were estimated to have already used some form of cloud technology in their operations as they look to scale projects in a more cost-effective number of ways. And the important thing about this survey and why we kind of included it was that was in late 2014. So obviously now we're at least a year and a half past that, and the numbers obviously are continuing to climb in terms of the use of cloud. Also, a recent Intel security survey of 1,200 cloud security decision makers across 8 countries found 80% of expected IT spend would go towards cloud services within a 16-month period. So obviously a lot of focus in terms on spending in terms of for cloud, both for security, but also for operators and enterprises out there. Security concerns is also a big part of the report. And again, one of the bigger challenges we found was facing the continued move towards cloud platform by telecom operators was indeed security. In the old world of hardware, it seemed like as long as the door remained physically locked, security was a pretty easy thing to handle. But in this new world of software, operators are finding they're having to rely increasingly on new solutions in order to manage security in a cloud environment. As was mentioned in the previous Intel security report, 23% of enterprises surveys noted cloud providers' data losses or breaches, and 1 in 5 reported unauthorized access to their organization's data or services in the cloud, thus highlighting the fact that while companies are moving more towards the cloud, there are indeed increased issues of security breaches in cloud deployments. questions around these attacks have also dinged enterprise confidence in public cloud security. Though a lot of effort has been put towards sealing up some of those holes, there is indeed a lot of concern there still about the security of services being used in the cloud. Highlighting that, I think we all heard earlier this year about Verizon Communications, the Enterprise Solutions Division, was hit by a data breach that reportedly included information on 1.5 million customers, which ended up for sale online. So even in terms of telecom space and private cloud deployments, there's been some issues there in terms of security issues. Another aspect that we kind of looked at and we heard a lot of response on was in terms of the increased use of IoT or the future of IoT, and what impact that might have on cloud security going forward. I think we all read recently about a massive a DDoS attack that knocked out some access to some major websites. And it sounded like from what was found out from that attack that the perpetrators leveraged internet-connected devices, including security cameras, to overwhelm DNS company DEN's infrastructure. So basically taking advantage of perhaps security lapses in IoT devices to perpetrate a DDoS attack on DEN's infrastructure there. And that's, again, going to be an issue probably going forward. I know a lot of people we talked to for this report touched on the IoT space, and I think we'll hear some more of that from our panel members as well. But IoT is obviously going to be a big part of the future of telecom, and it still seems like there might be some security issues that need to be rectified there in terms of maybe the hardware that's being deployed out in the networks. Okay, now what can be done? And this is obviously not a comprehensive look at what can be done out there, but one thing that we did notice from people we talked to was the use of cloud access security brokers. I know this will also be talked about a little bit later in the webinar, but CASBs were mentioned by a lot of people as a way that enterprises and operators can, I guess, group together their security efforts to have a more cohesive security policy across multiple cloud services. As noted, when linked to a cloud broker, which can help organizations provision and manage cloud services, CASBs are seen as a way to monitor cloud applications and data. And according to Gartner, CASBs were seen as the #1 technology trend for 2016 and a required technology for any enterprise using multiple cloud services, with the firm predicting large enterprises using those platforms to grow from less than 5% today to 85% by 2020. So a lot of growth predicted in terms of the use of CASBs. Also, what was noted by some was the issues in terms of interoperability testing. That is also, again, one of those issues where with a lot of different solutions being offered in the market, there's a concern about the ability to make sure that they're all these services can work together in a cohesive ecosystem. If something is not working well with something else out there, it could cause a hole in the security environment, and again, another access for perpetrators to perhaps take down a site or access secure information. So noted there, S-Platform may work well in a solid environment, but most commercial cloud and security deployments are made up of dozens of different components. Thus, anything deployed must show it can interoperate in the wild. So again, interoperability is a big part of this movement towards the cloud for the industry. And again, beyond the technical solutions, what was kind of interesting was that many noted that there are already out there in the market plenty of security solutions that should take care of pretty much all of security concerns out there. But the fact is that most rules aren't followed by either those deploying these systems or by employees at companies deploying these systems, and thus security holes are opened up just by a lack of following the rules of what's already out there. That was kind of, again, interesting that, again, there's enough technology out there to handle a lot of this. It's just a matter of following the rules in terms of deploying those platforms. And again, according to Gartner, through 2020, 95% of cloud security failures will be the customer's fault. So again, while there are indeed great platforms out there, one issue seemed to be the fact that, since there are, I guess these are required to be deployed, it's maybe maybe on the mind of those deploying these platforms to make sure that everything is being followed in terms of the rules, but also that perhaps the companies that are providing security platforms may want to include more automation in the process to allow perhaps for some of those human failure holes to be taken into account. So that's something to be looked at going forward as well. All right, well, there, like I said, a quick overview on the topic there. There's more insight there in the report that can be available on our site here shortly. But with that, I wanted to bring on Jerry Purdy from AOT MP to talk a bit about an analyst perspective on the topic and provide some insight there as well. So Jerry, thanks for taking the time today. We definitely appreciate it.
Dan, thanks a lot. Appreciate being able to offer some comments. You know, I'm a mobile-centric guy and been covering mobile. Of course, mobile includes a lot of security. So I thought it would be good to sort of see where you'll see the dimension of sort of the arrow going from the center of the organization out to mobile and into the cloud. And I think we'll tee up some good information for the other 2 or 3 people that are going to talk today. Let's go to the next slide. AOTMP, I can tell you, people listening to this, I'd say, using a Gartner term for that last presentation, 95% probably haven't heard of AOTMP. Not time to read all the things on there, but think of the company as a vertical industry version of Gartner focused on telecom and mobile. A company has been around years, and it provides services, research services, education services on how to run your telecom and mobile environment excellently, and they give a lot of support to how to manage those assets in the company. And since telecom has moved over the years toward mobile, they were looking for a mobile person that could help complement their telecom history. And so I've joined them to help organizations give advice to vendors on strategy and direction to help them with the enterprise, and then with enterprises to help them be able to make good use of the mobile environment and to run it more efficiently and more effectively. Next slide.
All right.
I think the interesting, got this off the internet, it's a McAfee, of course McAfee's not part of Intel, but it's a McAfee diagram shows a good overview of what the security environment is, where the touch points are, and how does the cloud interface with all of this. All of it is centered around security management, but you can see that the cloud security in the upper part has to do with all the interfaces to all the outside elements. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And then on the lower right, the endpoint security has to do with everything that the devices and sometimes bots and software are interacting with the cloud through, again, the outside elements are like a rotating dial because they can fit into any of the internal ones. And then you've got your network security on your left that is running to maintain viability of the overall network. So I think this is a good way to show that, with the outside elements being things like risk and compliance and authentication over on the right. And when you get that group, CASBs integrating together, one of the outcomes is the single sign-on process lower right, meaning you can sign on once and the partners that comply are able to not have to further do logons for other apps, and that's getting to be very popular. Of course, you have desktop backup as an element of security, and theft, security, event, and logon management. So all these elements together, I think, offer you as a participant in this seminar today, webinar, to have a good reference system like this for where do the pieces fit into the overall architecture. Next slide. Threats. There's people categorize them in a number of ways. You can always come up with a new one, but this certainly will get a good description on many of them. I would make a comment that if you look at what the threats are, the objectives overall are usually in a perpetrator or a hacker is to get something. They typically want to get into a system and grab hold of something, typically on a server. That's not 100%, but it certainly is the goal of the Sony hack and many others, to go get credit card information and otherwise. So stolen identity, the very first one, is that terrible thing that happens where somebody's identity is transferred to from a white hat to a black hat, and they get in. Like in the Sony's case, they not only got in, they got to rake out the entire company's online assets, which they probably should have partitioned to make it protective. So stolen identity is a terrible one. It comes in a lot of different forms, but it basically makes it easy. There isn't really a high, room full of engineers sitting trying to get into a system when you simply are given the password and user ID. Boom, you're in. Malware, second, is a different, very different one, because it operates in a way where the user places malware on the server or on the client, then migrates to the server and does something. So it's a sort of a silent piece of software that comes in through a Trojan horse of some kind. Third, ransom attack. We've seen a lot of that in the press lately. A hacker encrypts files on the server, typically making the site unaccessible and not functional, and demands money in order to decrypt the file and give it back. Most of them so far that I've read about have in fact gone back to live after they've paid their ransom fee. At one hospital in California, I guess, advertised paid $38,000 to get its system back. And then denial of service. Denial of service so much isn't really an attack to get information as much as attack to prevent. If you don't want the site to be used, you can try to have so much attack going on to it that it really doesn't allow the site to work. So I think if you look at these systems, they are the ones that most of the time the problems are associated with these kinds of attacks. Go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Thank you much. Now, an active network to cloud security takes multiple service sets and components. I put this together with referencing 3 other slide systems, my own, my business acquaintance, Jason Porter at AT&T, network security and so forth. Maybe it's partly due to artistic, but it's also partly due to the guts of what a environment is like, and a great reference system for you to keep if you're looking to make sure you have a checklist of what you need to do, both on the endpoint and in the cloud. And you've got this enterprise network security sitting in the middle. You've got analytics going from service entities on the left and security elements on the right, or elements that you want to maintain secure. In the case of up in the upper right, you could have an AT&T cloud. You could have a third-party cloud. You could probably have a Verizon cloud, of course. And you might have multiple vendor clouds, by the way. There might be 2 divisions that operate in cloud environments. So I probably should have simply put up ... in the upper right. Then you have, in many companies, have part of what they're doing is in a public cloud environment. And the other thing they may be doing is keeping a very private cloud about some certain intellectual property. And down at the bottom, you have the premises and the data center that it operates. And on the left, the functions that are occurring, the web filtering that's going on, the intrusion detection is happening to try to detect if there's a malware or an attempt to get into information on the cloud on the right, or you have some kind of firewall that you put up, or you've scanned, and then you've done some data loss prevention so that you can make sure that if data is getting accessed, all of it doesn't go to one party without proper additional authentication. And then down at the bottom, analytics, which ties the 2 together. As these services are running on the left, you get information and how they're interacting with the cloud elements on the right. And that can yield management review and decisions to either further service elements or other cloud partitions to protect the data in the network. Okay, next slide.
All right.
Common ways to manage the threats. I think all of these should be a checklist item for you to consider. This two-factor authentication is getting very popular for making sure who you are, at least most of the time. And you can do that through this two-factor authentication. You've seen it in a lot of public sites do this. Microsoft does this with their Office 365 to get into the account. It sends a text message to your phone, gives you a code, and you apply the code so they know that the text went to you. You put the code in, and that authenticates you back to the system. And that's a one step further difficult way to prevent people from getting in. The second one, utilize offsite backup. That's something that sometimes you think, well, if it's in the cloud, it's secure and it's all okay. Well, if it gets stolen, what happens then? Or if, let's say, the company had a major hack occur and your partition got hit, or the company went out of business. You know, Amazon is going to go out of business, but a young cloud company might be bought by somebody else, and there's a difficulty in transferring assets from one system to another. Putting things off-site at a separate location also means that if your company is hit with a disaster, a hurricane, a fire, a gas explosion or something, the information can be retrieved. I have a habit of keeping about 100 gigabytes of information in a safe deposit box and trying to update that about once a year so that if any disaster occurred, I can get back with most of the information that I've created. Firewalls, intrusion detection, we've already talked about. Make sure about segmenting your information. Look at that Sony hack. If all that information had been segmented so they couldn't migrate further than the initial log on, a lot of that intellectual property would have been saved. And you can do that also for things like finance and marketing. You may segment clouds very, very separately. And then, of course, the challenge to protecting mobile devices adds this new dimension from cloud to mobile. I keep doing this in public talks. You got to get access. Should you do that, some kind of biomedical process? It may be necessary to do that. On-device encryption, encrypt the device information in case the thing gets stolen. Wi-Fi hotspot liabilities are vulnerable, and making sure that you manage that and then protect that wireless link. So these are ways that I think are good reference items. Next slide. This is I'll give you a sample of 208 people where we do market research with enterprise customers every month. And I get into the cycle once a quarter with a dedicated mobile survey. But we have a market research team. They have a good panel of qualified enterprise buyers. And I thought this was a very interesting chart that was done in the last 12 months with asking these end users and enterprise people. It's not consumer, it's an enterprise survey. What are your greatest challenges in managing corporate-owned devices when it happens to be mobile? And look at the very first one, monitoring and enforcing policy. I have probably said this in a lot of lectures that often the companies will end up putting things together, but they won't, say, setting up a program, but they won't not only create a policy management around it, but won't inform the employees so that they aren't bought into it. And then all of a sudden you get out of compliance very easy when somebody says, well, I didn't know that. So ensuring mobile data security, number two, that's clear. A lot of times that just isn't done. I'll tell you another thing that AOTMP is classic on. First time when they do audits, our company does audits. Usually one of the first things we always find is some employees that left the company, but their wireless plan's still being paid. That's a way to help reduce some expenses. Controlling roaming, all these kind of things. The company I work for doesn't do the software. What we do is advise the clients on how to get the right kind of software that can help them manage their environment as all these mobile devices connect to the cloud. So there's a good set of items here to take as reference. I want to thank you all for letting me share some of these items, and I hope they're helpful to you in sort of the cloud mobile continuum that we have in the world today. Next slide. Is that my last one? I think it may be.
I think that was your last one. That's perfect. Well, Jerry, definitely appreciate the insight there. And again, Jerry's going to be part of our little roundtable discussion here later on. And again, if you got any questions for Jerry, I want to remind everybody to go ahead and use the questions tab there on the control panel. You can send those questions in. And again, either for Jerry or for anybody else on the panel. And we'll try to get to those at the end of the webinar. All right, so with that, I want to now bring on Andy Daudelin from VP of Cloud Solutions at AT&T. Talk a bit about what AT&T is doing in terms of its cloud work and how it's securing its cloud platform. So Andy, we thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. And, you know, as you described in the beginning and as Jerry described in the cloud world, there's definitely more vulnerabilities that we need to pay attention to. But the good news is you can be more secure in the cloud than you were in the old traditional environment in just your corporate data centers. And there's some easy things that can be done to make you more secure. And I'm going to just cover 4 simple steps that I believe can significantly improve your cloud security on an end-to-end basis. And the first 2 steps on this slide is, number 1, securing your mobile devices with something like an enterprise mobile management platform. And number 2 will be secure end-to-end connectivity. But the mobile devices, and it was a great lead-in that Jerry finished with some of the mobile concerns and some of the threats there and what needs to be done. And I think the most important things to cover there are making sure your device has something on it to protect it from things like malware and viruses coming in, but also to manage your device in terms of being able to track it, find it if it's lost, wipe the data if it gets stolen. Things like that can really be a powerful tool, especially in corporations, because if someone loses a device, you want to be able to quickly wipe it clean or terminate the access. So enterprise mobile management platforms across your mobile devices can help secure your endpoints. The second very important thing to do is to have secure connectivity end to end so that your data is secure in transit. And what we recommend at AT&T is the most secure way is to be completely off internet and have a secure connection off internet end to end. In the absence of that, there are some techniques that can be employed to provide higher levels of security than just being out in the open with no protection. But private connectivity gives you the ability to be completely isolated from many of the threats that were just talked about, like DDoS attacks as an example. So what we've done is taken our VPN service, AT&T MPLS VPN service, which is private connectivity, and developed a product called AT&T NetBond, which connects the private connectivity, extends that connection into an ecosystem of cloud service providers. So basically what we've done is run connectivity into 16 partner clouds, and we connect at over 50 locations around the world, Europe, Australia, Asia, North America, but to an ecosystem of 16 major cloud providers and growing. And we connect in at the API level so that it's not just connectivity to the cloud to the front door, but really integrated all the way in at the app level. And that's very important because it enables dynamic and agile connectivity and lets you do things like bursting, so that rather than a dedicated link that's fixed size, it's connectivity into an ecosystem that can expand and contract to meet the needs. Also, integrating at the API level lets us to do things with the routing that enables us to ensure traffic is off internet all the time, whether it's initiated from, let's say, a SaaS provider like Salesforce or Office 365. Oftentimes, the transaction's initiated from the cloud, not the end user. So you want that traffic to route appropriately across the private networking. So what this picture is showing is secure the end devices with a mobile device management. We have several that we offer through AT&T, and then secure the connectivity end-to-end at AT&T. The way we do that is through our AT&T VPN combined with AT&T NetBond, which gives an end-to-end highly secure private link all the way into the clouds. If we can go to the next page, and the third simple step to secure your cloud connectivity is to ensure your data is encrypted. And we just recently launched a service around this that would encrypt it, but you don't just want to encrypt it in transit, although that's important. You want it encrypted when it's crossing the network, but you also want it encrypted while it's at rest in the cloud, so that your data is encrypted at rest and in transit. There's different offers out there. What we have is an integrated offer we can provide that does it on the device and then in transit and then also in the cloud. The next slide will show the fourth and last step I wanted to cover, which, following in the theme that Jerry described, that it's important to control usage and monitor usage, and that many of the threats from end user behavior is cloud access security brokers. And as Dan described at the beginning of the session, cloud access security brokers are an excellent tool. They've been around for a couple of years, but they've reached a level of maturity that make it very powerful. And you can put that in the path between your network and the clouds, and it does several things. One, it can give you visibility into where people are going. Two, you can set policy as to what people can do, who can do what when. You can say this particular group can access these types of files, but this other group cannot. So maybe your sales force does not have access to engineering drawings or HR files, and HR does. And or engineering has access to the engineering files, HR has access to the HR files, but not only set the policy, but then monitor as to what people are doing, and then also monitor for abnormal behavior. So maybe a particular person has access to the HR files, but you notice they just downloaded all the personnel files for everyone in the company. So that's a red flag, right? So you're able to call that person. Maybe they were doing something inappropriately and caught them, or maybe they didn't even know when they were breached from another place and somebody was hacking through them to get to those. The CASB enables you to detect and then follow up on it. So it's a very effective control point. So if we go to the next slide, just to summarize how you can provide easy and highly secure access to the cloud. So what we like to view our mission as is helping our customers to move to the cloud with confidence. And that's with global secure connectivity, a way to deploy simply, like our NetBond service that gives you secure access into a whole cloud ecosystem, and to do that with encrypted data to make sure it's highly secure, and with redundancy throughout the network to be reliable. And one last slide I wanted to cover, just another thing we're doing in the cloud space to make things simpler, and by improving simplicity and driving end-to-end integrated solutions, that also helps with security because the customer doesn't need to manage multiple piece parts. So we had just expanded our strategic alliance with AWS, where we provide the network, managed security, mobile connectivity to the Internet of Things. AWS, as you know, provides storage, compute, developer platform, and analytic tools. So this expansion of our strategic alliance that we just announced last month is for us together to bring to the market integrated solutions. And at the heart of those integrated solutions, things are simpler to manage and thereby improve security. With that, turn it back to you, Dan.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Andy. That's great insight there. And again, for those who have any questions for Andy or for Jerry or for anybody on the panel, please feel free to use that questions tab there on the control panel, and we'll try to get to those questions at the end. But again, I already have I have a couple questions already set up for Andy on that as well. But I think we definitely will have time for some questions from those listening in. But again, thanks so much, Andy, for the insight there. We definitely appreciate that. It's always good to get AT&T's take on what's happening in security space, as you guys are definitely in the center of a lot of that there. So we appreciate that. So with that, I want to bring on our final panel member here. This will be Walter Kendrick, who's the Director of Product Marketing at Sonus, to provide a bit of a perspective from the company on the topic as well. So thanks, Walter, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dan. Why don't we go ahead and forward? So just real quick, Sonus, we're in the business of securing and supporting real-time communications, providing intelligence on voice, video type of services, and really focusing on the reliability and scale, as well as driving those solutions towards the cloud. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of what we really wanted to talk about. So as was discussed earlier, was pretty much a little bit more centric around the data side of security. And I'm going to take it from a little different angle on the real-time communication slide. So, you know, our voice calls, our video calls. And with the advent of moving towards SIP trunking for your voice services, we're now starting to see that new security threats are being exposed in the network, as opposed to those days where we had proprietary phone systems and, you know, the closed walls where we had to be worried about things such as toll fraud. Now we've opened up the door to a much broader attack surface with IP. So we get things like call hijacking, or maybe malware is embedded into the signaling or the media session, or they're able to exfiltrate data from a media session. Certainly have to deal now with the denial of service attacks and distributed denial of service attacks. So the point here is people are moving towards new different types of communications, whether they're inside of their network or as part of a hosted solution, or even as service providers move towards voice over LTE type of services, or voice over Wi-Fi type of services for the mobile side. Security is going to be very important on the real-time communication side, because that attack surface is becoming so broad and dynamic in the way that it's being addressed. So let's go ahead and move forward. So why do we need these new security approaches? Well, at the very end, there's a lot of different companies that are focused on security, and it's hard to keep up. You know, to innovate as fast as hackers is just almost near impossible. So the existing controls become ineffective very quickly over new threats. And more importantly, you know, especially in the communications world, because you have remote workers that need to get in, you have customers in the wild that need to contact your organization. The inside of the network can no longer be trusted. So you're really getting into a borderless type of security environment as you move to, you know, different types of communications to meet the needs not only of your customers, but also the users inside of your network. And so the attackers are becoming much more smarter and innovative. You know, I think Jerry spoke about the, you know, the Amazon, the DIN attack that just happened recently, you know, that brought down the Amazon site, and I think brought down Twitter as well. A little botnet that fired up and started doing a denial of service attack across a huge environment. So these attackers are becoming very innovative in terms of how they're going to get in, and they're going to start using the communications platform as a way to either do reconnaissance, just kind of poke around, see what's going on, or to attack, to launch attacks inside of the network, maybe to bring down a company or crash a SIP server or something like that. So the vulnerabilities continue to grow as these attackers start to innovate faster. And so, as you look at your security policies inside of your network, you absolutely have to look at the data side, but you need to even be more cognizant of the voice communication side, because the exposure is becoming very great, and you need to reduce that threat across all areas of your communications environment. And to reduce that threat, by strengthening those security controls right at the network level, in particular with voice communications. So let's go to the next slide. We can just kind of build this one out if you don't mind. So here at Sonus, we're kind of taking a different approach. So we build session border controllers, and session border controllers are great at securing the communications against denial of service attacks, doing topology hiding, being a back-to-back user agent, providing encryption both on the signaling side and the media side. So as we look at it, we're kind of taking a different mindset in terms of how are we going to evolve the SBC to meet the needs of the next generation type of attacks. And so we're looking at a way that we can tie together analytics as well as orchestration for security. And the way it kind of works is you have this enterprise network of, could be, our SBC, could be a next-gen firewall, could be a policy control type server. And so we're looking at creating a synergistic combination of architecture and analytics that really empowers a more effective and efficient security methodology, if you will, across this distributed real-time network. So we can deliver security policy to any enforcer, and an enforcer would be a firewall or SBC anywhere within the network. And it really kind of looks like this. So we would detect something, these sensors, which also work as enforcers, send up data, send up logs that can be analyzed into a data warehouse. We can apply policy controls, so we can look at trends and what's going on. And then we can say that to avoid any type of false positives, we can push down policy across the network, or maybe somebody already has a SEIM type of tool, a security event information management tool. We can send policy up to them. We can share information with that, because we're not going to end up being the end-all be-all. But we certainly want to focus on for real-time communications. And we can pass that information down to the network elements, whether it's SBC or a next-gen firewall, whatever it may be, so we can properly respond to those events and prevent them from happening as they're going forward. If you look at next-gen firewalls, they're great at stopping things like malware and spyware right up the front. But if it's encrypted, that potentially could get through. And especially if you put it into a SIP message, and if it's encrypted, the next-gen firewall is not going to see it. In fact, next-gen firewalls, when it comes to SIP communications, they basically tell you right up front, you can do a Google search, and they'll tell you how to turn it off, because it's really ineffective and performance draining on those systems. So we're looking at how we can share information with those types of things. So the firewall can get the best information from the SBC, and vice versa. We can get great information to protect those networks from the firewall as well, to protect end-to-end the entire security infrastructure. Let's go ahead and move forward. So we have a couple of dummies books. If you want to learn more, certainly SIP trunking, session border controllers, but one that I would absolutely suggest the audience go and take a look at is Securing Real-Time Communications. And give you really great insight on the types of possible security threats you may see within your voice and video environment, how to secure it, as well as give you insights on terms of where the next generation is going for security on real-time communications, and how companies like Sonos are trying to react and provide intelligent solutions, intelligent, secure solutions for you inside of your networks.
Perfect.
With that, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Sounds great. Thanks, Walter. It's always nice to see some For Dummies books out there. I think, again, for most people, it's always very helpful. But also good things you brought up there in terms of the fact that it's not just traditional data that we think of that needs to be protected, but also on the voice side of things. Again, as operators are moving towards more IP-based voice services out there, that is a big part of the equation as well. So definitely appreciate the insight on that. Thanks so much, Walter. So, and with that, I do want to do a little bit of a panel discussion here. Again, if anybody has any questions for our panel members, please feel free to use the questions tab there on the control panel. You can send those in and we can kind of give those answered as well. But I wanted to, I guess, discuss a little bit, maybe start off with Jerry on this, is just kind of ask, I know, Jerry, you guys talk a lot to a lot of enterprises out there and a lot of companies in terms of their security needs. I guess, what's the general feeling you're hearing out there in terms of the security environment? It does seem like for enterprises that it seems like, every week or every month there's a new security threat. And I'm guessing for the IT guys out there, trying to stay on top of this has got to be, they already have their own full-time job, but this also seems like just staying on top of the latest threats has got to be quite the challenge. I guess maybe from what you're hearing out there, I guess, how are they looking at, I guess, the environment in terms of their ability to stay on top of this growing threat that's coming out there from, it seems like, all different angles out there?
Great question. A lot of people could make comments about this, and I think that IT is being challenged from a budgetary standpoint to figure out where to place their dollars in the overall environment. What you do know, or what we all, you can just, it's obvious, you can just sort of see what's happening by what companies are doing. They're putting more money in the external or the cloud environment, and money going into the distributed mobile environment, because that's where the people are doing the work. And I think your main question is, so if I'm working in that capacity, what do I need to do where do I place my bets or time or money to keep things secure? It's like a whack-a-mole, right? You hit one area and it comes in the other area. But I think that it's important to make sure, as Andy was saying about that end-to-end capability, is don't leave a hole if you're trying to implement an end-to-end capability. It may not be for everything in the company, but at least it's for part of it. Don't leave a hole in it, because somebody will find that hole and jeopardize you through their gaining access. Another thing that is, what is this? 70% of this hacking is and activities are the company's fault. There was a comment about that. It's probably even higher than that, 90%.
Mm-hmm.
So do things like partitioning data with separate access mechanisms, requiring user names and at least the password to be changed, implement two-factor authentication. I think you try to get a handle on it, and then you have to have don't forget this point, have a dialogue with the senior executive team about this. It's not that they have to become your security technology advisors or something, but they, at least with the management team, knowing together what you're doing, it allows for better recognition of what the problem is, what steps are being taken, what the cost is, and then maybe the cost implication if you don't could be gigantic. So that's my comment on that one. Great first question.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of an all-encompassing one there, but I definitely appreciate the insight there. Well, I know we got a question that came in from someone. It looks like they're asking about, I guess, the implications of mobile edge computing for adding security analytics tools at a cloud at the edge of a mobile network. And maybe for Andy, I don't know if that's something you guys are looking at much. I guess obviously mobile edge computing is kind of a growing part of the space as well. Again, this move towards virtualization seems to be really powering a lot of new innovations in terms of the mobile networks. I know AT&T has been very aggressive in terms of moves towards virtualization. I guess, have you guys viewed or looked much at the impact of mobile edge computing on security aspect of the network out there?
Yes, definitely. And I think, as you described, our focus in AT&T is to get everything to be software defined. So network function virtualization, have functions virtualized in the network, run things in the network and at the edges, as well as in the cloud. And when we do it in the network, obviously that's leveraging cloud technology just within the network. But I think this question about the data and the analytics, it gets back to somewhat to your initial question around, boy, this sounds like a lot. How do you take it all in and analyze it, especially if you're small and don't have a large IT or security staff? So that's why we're extremely focused in big data analytics, especially in the security space. So just some examples and mind-boggling numbers that we deal with. But the network's a great place for visibility because we're transmitting roughly 125 petabytes of traffic a day across the network. And that gives us visibility to a large number of, a large amount of information, right, that we can use. We also get in billions of records of net flow records and ingest that into an analytics engine. We also take data off of premises security devices that we have visibility to and manage, or network logs, as well as the customer logs. Put all of that into a data lake in our threat intellect platform, run that through, and what you end up with is billions of pieces of information going in and maybe 100 or less events a day coming out that need to be acted on. And out of those 100, we've got roughly 2,000 security experts across the company. So we have the wherewithal to even getting from the billions to the 100 or so, that's important to make it manageable, to find the needle in the haystack. But still dealing with the 100 or so, you need quite a large staff to deal with that. So we deal with, you know, roughly 2,000 security experts that can sort through those, take action, and do the right thing. But I think in terms of mobile edge computing, what it does is it just is another point of potential vulnerability, but also another point to collect data. In terms of managing all the data, what we believe is taking data from multiple points, being able to put it into an analytics engine that integrates across the entire environment to make an intelligent choice through automation of what needs to be acted on, and then have a very robust security staff or use a provider, like we have a couple thousand, that can have the wherewithal to sort through it. The other good thing about using a provider is they have visibility across many other customers. So like we leverage, we're serving virtually all the Fortune 500. So we have information from many different points, as well as the government, that we can leverage in terms of taking those learnings from the threats and applying them to other environments.
Interesting. Yeah, I know talking with some of the people, and I think I talked with you about it as well, on the topic of kind of, again, this movement towards virtualization. It's really opening up the possibilities. I mean, it does seem like that there is obviously a greater or larger threat vector out there, because there is so much more connectivity and different ways to get into a network. But it does seem like hand in hand with that is this move towards virtualization is allowing operators in the industry to really have new tools in place to be able to react to those things in real time or near real time. And like you said, kind of getting these billions and billions of data points coming in at once, being able to parse through those and come down to 100 or so actual threats in near real time it kind of shows the importance and highlights kind of the advances being made in terms of virtualization. It's allowing this stuff to happen in an environment, and really it's almost happening, you know, not behind the scenes necessarily, but it's really happening relatively quickly as well.
And the customers can move around. So a customer deploying in the cloud, that's much more powerful than what a customer used to have to deploy in their own private data center. If you're deployed in your own private data center and that has a problem, you're in trouble. If you're in the cloud, you can move around, whether it's a security issue or a natural disaster. you're much more agile to move around when events like that happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. And maybe for Walter too, I know you guys have done quite a bit of work in terms of this movement towards virtualization, and I think you mentioned too in your slides the analytics aspect as well. I guess how important has that been from a vendor perspective in terms of the ability for you guys to maybe create or alter your own platforms to kind of really serve what is kind of this new market out there in terms of what's happening from security and different services being offered by operators?
Yeah, so as we're seeing our customers move towards NFV, we've taken a pretty strong stance in redesigning our platform. There's virtualization, which I term as just running in VMware. Then there's actually being real cloud optimized and running into more of a microservices type of architecture. And we've done a tremendous amount of work with that to provide customers such as AT&T, all the tier 1, tier 2 type of service providers out there with a platform that they can provide their communications in that NFV type of environment. Been very successful there. Now with that comes the whole security aspect of it. So we're collecting lots and lots of data across, whether it's the signaling plane or the media plane, that we need to be able to share with other elements either on the Sona side or within third-party type of solutions that may be in that service provider's network. And so that's where we came up with this framework to collect not only like CDRs, but system logs, and look at everything that's going on, similar to what Andy was speaking about earlier, and churning through a tremendous amount of data that could be used for instantiating another instance of the SBC, but from the security aspect of it, looking for behavioral anomalies that are going on within the network. Are we seeing too many calls going out to Nigeria? Are we having robocalls that are attacking our base customers, and we want to stop that right at the edge of the network, and we want to share that across the entire platform. So we want to take those types of use cases, build out that analytics engine on top of this data warehouse, so you can apply the policies to the right pieces of the network for your communications in your communication network. Then you really have kind of this unified security platform. So we're trying to broaden and deepen in terms of where communications fall within the whole security stack.
Makes sense. That sounds good. Well, I think I want to get one more quick question in here as well, but maybe for Jerry. And I know Jerry, you recently did a column for us here, kind of looking at the IoT space, and it did seem like in this report, IoT was kind of mentioned by a number of people we talked to. And I guess maybe from your point of view, and I know you kind of mentioned the need to secure devices out there, and it does seem like kind of moving forward that the IoT devices might be that new paradigm, the new challenge for a lot of companies and operators. And how they secure these things. I guess what's your general view on maybe the impact that these expected growth curves for IoT might have on the network and in terms of that security challenge? I guess what are you seeing out there in terms of being able to tackle that aspect of device security?
Yeah, well, I think that first of all, the device loading structure against networks, AT&T knows this. The people making sensors know this is going to go skyrocket over the next number of years, and I don't mean a lifetime of years. Say over the next 10 years, we're going to see billions of devices be attached to the network. Now, you have to make a sort of intellectual analysis if they are a low, low bandwidth, very low bandwidth, sort of a sensor doing a monitor of something. Maybe it has low relative importance from a liability standpoint, and the temperature of that particular thing isn't attached to a valve that's going to change the water level in a lake or something. But if you find that there are important pieces of distributed stuff, then working a distributed architecture, as Andy was saying, drive that out into the smaller sensors. We'll find encryption on them, particularly if those are stored forward. If I'm collecting lots of important information now in a small system on a chip logic. I can get, you know, gigabytes of information being sitting there. So it could be very valuable, and therefore they have to be dealt with. A couple of things to remember on IoT. Many of the architectures and the sensors that are out there don't need a lot of bandwidth. So you don't need a high-speed LTE connection, or you use what's being discussed in Gen 5 is the low power version of LTE in the next generation. And so if you don't need a lot of throughput, you're not doing video, you're doing a sensor and a read occasionally and doing it at night, you read out at night, you can take advantage of the lower power capabilities and lower power networks. Also, I noticed yesterday, just to me, it was sort of well, that now demonstrates where we're headed on this side. And what I did is tried to put this out into yesterday in a little note. Sigfox announced a $2 modem for that, and we're going to see, you know, lots of low power, low cost stuff being distributed. And when the cost is low, it makes it easy. A lot of people are going to put it out there, but I think we're also going to see a lot of hiccups that people haven't taken into account security, and there'll be some kind of breach. It'll do a stop and whoops, we better upgrade the security level. So lots of
yeah, lots happening still in the market there. We definitely appreciate it. Well, again, I want to thank everyone again for all the questions, and sorry for those that we did not get to. We're just about out of time here, but we will be sharing a list of questions with our panel members who, if time allows, can follow up individually with those. But again, thanks for those questions that were sent in. And also I want to remind everybody that this webinar will be archived on the rcrwireless.com site in the next day or so for those that might have missed some of it or want to go back and reference some of the slides as well. And please make sure to check out the feature report on the topic as well. That is now available, should be available here shortly on our site on the topic. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining us and for our participants today. And a special thanks to Jerry, Andy, and Walter for providing insight. Sorry about that. And a thanks a lot to everyone for joining us, and have a good afternoon.